Hello everyone, Jared Mumma here, waiting for the return of the Byzantine Empire, Christos Aneste. One concern that I notice a lot when people are wanting to learn ancient Greek is the alphabet. People look at it and it intimidates them. It looks strange in a lot of ways to people. I think most people who are native speakers of English, who are used to the Roman alphabet that we use, and they think of it almost like a code that'll be difficult to crack, it'll be hard to read, and it's a stumbling block for a lot of people who want to approach this language. And I wanted to make this video to kind of disabuse everybody of this notion. The Greek alphabet is easy to learn, and in fact, in a lot of ways, in most ways, easier to learn than the alphabet we use for English, the Roman alphabet. Why is that? Well, the Greek alphabet is made for the Greek language, whereas the Roman alphabet that we use for English was made for Latin. And so when you take an alphabet made for Latin and you slap it onto English, you end up with what we have. Letters that have no sound, and sounds we have no letter for, so that kind of thing. But in general, understanding why the ancient Greek alphabet is easy to learn, or why it's easier to learn than English, will give you confidence, I think. And to demonstrate how much easier it is to learn than the alphabet we use for English, than the Roman alphabet, I want to talk a little bit, kind of digress for a minute and talk about the nature of writing itself. Any system of writing is just a symbolic way to represent a language. What's interesting about writing is that it comes relatively late in the human experience. People don't write stuff down for most of the time human beings have been around. Scientists will tell you human beings have been around for, like 200,000 years or so. But it's not until people start settling down in cities that it even occurs to them to record anything. And it's not until really around 3000 BC or so that you start to see actual systems of writing pop up. The first system of writing that ever pops up is called cuneiform. That's in ancient Sumeria, the civilization of Sumer. How did it start? Why did it start? Nobody really knows, because by the time people start recording the past, they've already got writing, and so nobody really remembered how it started. But probably what happened is people are trying to count. You got these kings, they're extracting resources from their people, they need to keep track of what they have. So you get a bunch of cows, right? So you gotta count how many cows you have. You get an accountant to go in there, and what's he do? Every cow that comes through the gate, he draws a little picture of a cow. And that gets taxing after a while. So instead of drawing the whole cow, he just draws the cow's head. And then after a while, he just draws kind of a little circle with horns or something like that. And then eventually it just sort of devolves into little wedges. They take a reed, a piece of kind of grass that grows by the river, and they cut it into a sharp point, and you stick it in the clay like this, and you can get these little collections of wedges. And each one of those collections of wedges put together in a little block represents an entire word. That's called a logogram. Now this works great for Sumerian, although it's pretty dang complicated. One thing about these early systems of writing, they're very complicated. People say, "Oh, why do you come up with a system of writing that's so complicated?" Well, because it happens slowly, haphazardly, over time, and people just learned the way their predecessors have learned and just kind of added to it, to the point where you had this really complicated system. Now, it was a complicated system that worked fine for Sumerians. When other people came in and took over Sumer, people who spoke Semitic languages, like the Akkadian languages, Assyrian, Babylonian, later on Aramaic, and stuff like that, when they came in with these Semitic languages, they took that system of writing Sumerians had and they adapted it for their own language. Problem is now, just like we have with the Roman alphabet in English, you've got big blocks of letters, and they just don't really, the language and the writing system don't really match up. So they start to take these characters that the Sumerians had come up with, and instead of just treating it like a logogram, they treat it like a syllable. Imagine, for instance, in English, if you had the word sun, right? And sun could mean the sun in the sky, or sun could mean the sun that, your son, son and daughter. In English, we can distinguish those two words because we have a true alphabet where each character represents an individual sound. But if you don't have that, imagine you just had a whole block of something that was the word sun. How would you tell the two apart? Well, you got to have some other character then. So you introduce something called a determinative. So you got the word sun, and then you'll have like a little cloud after it. Oh, that's the sun in the sky. Or you have a little dad after, or something. Oh, that's the sun, like father has a son. So it gets even more complicated at that point, and then eventually it kind of shifts over to being wholly syllabic. In other words, each block of letters, they move from representing an entire word to representing a syllable, sa, ka, like that. Kind of like a noun and a consonant combination, or a vowel and consonant combination. Now, systems of writing like this still exist. In fact, the Chinese language is wholly logographic. In other words, each Chinese character represents an entire word. Japan uses logograms, kanji, Chinese characters. They have two syllabaries, two systems of syllabic writing. Hiragana used for Japanese words, katakana used for dirty foreign words, and they use romaji, Roman characters that we use where it's an actual true alphabet. So if you go to Japan, learning how to read things is challenging for a native English speaker, to say the least. But that's not the only system of writing, though, that pops up early. There's the other, more famous system of writing they developed in Egypt called, that's right, hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics, again, just like cuneiform, nobody knows exactly how they develop. It takes time. Hieroglyphics complicated in the same way that cuneiform is complicated, where the words have a logographic value, a syllabic value. There are those determinatives again. The system of writing lasts for thousands of years, and so over time, the characters accumulate different values for language, stuff like that. So it's a very complicated system. Now, among the people who are in the cultural orbit of the Egyptians are a group called the Phoenicians. They live in what's today Lebanon, that area. And the Phoenicians are not builders of massive civilizations like the Sumerians and Egyptians. They don't have these god kings and palace complexes, ziggurats, pyramids, all this stuff. The Phoenicians, they like money. They're traders. They get in their ships and they sail all over the Mediterranean and beyond, trading for stuff. They like to keep things simple. So they know about hieroglyphics, and they take this vast, complicated hieroglyphic system, and they take it and they simplify it enormously. And they create a system of writing that we call an alphabet. Now, I know what you're thinking, those of you who know languages, technically, yes, it's an abjad because it doesn't have symbols for vowels. It's all consonants, right? Yes, but the big breakthrough that these Phoenicians make, and it's not just them, there's like a Proto-Semitic alphabet, it's a little more complicated than what I'm saying, but the Phoenicians are the stars of our story here. The big advance that they make is that they create a system of writing where each character represents not an entire word, not even a syllable, but an individual sound. And with that, you need relatively few characters. Understand, to read Japanese, you need to know something like 3,000 individual kanji, as well as both tables of those hiragana and katakana. To read an alphabet, you need, the alphabet we use for English, the Roman alphabet, has 26 characters. The ancient Greek alphabet has 24. Relatively small number of characters to represent language. And it's a big breakthrough. So where do the Greeks enter our story? Well, Phoenicians were among the people the ancient Greeks traded with. And when the Phoenicians encounter the ancient Greeks take this alphabet from the Phoenicians and they adapt it for their language. They have a different sound inventory than the Phoenicians had. The Phoenicians speak a Semitic language. The ancient Greeks speak what's called an Indo-European language, like English, like a lot of others. And that's another video. I'll talk about Indo-European languages. But they take this abjad and they take some of those symbols and they convert them into symbols of vowels. So now you have a true alphabet. You have a system of writing that contains characters for consonants and vowels, and that's the ancient Greek alphabet. From ancient Greece, it's going to make its way to Italy. It's going to make its way to a people called the Etruscans, and it's going to make its way through them, and there's some controversy about this. So, it's going to make its way through those Etruscans down into Rome itself, where the Roman people are going to adapt it for the Latin language. They're going to change some of the meanings of the characters around. So, what's the Greek alphabet look like? Okay, now, this is the Greek alphabet as it appears in my Athanasde book, Athanasde Book 1. As you can see, this book is a little the worse for wear. It's a little beaten up. I've had this thing since
I don't know, about 2005 or so. Some of the pages are falling out. So anybody, I don't want to start like a Kickstarter or anything, maybe wants to kick in and get me another Athanasde book, I'd be really appreciative. But I thought I'd go through this here and just kind of show you exactly what I'm talking about and go over a little bit about how these characters are pronounced. It's simple. There are, however, a couple of controversies with a couple of the letters because since the language has changed so much since ancient times, no one is 100% sure that each letter is pronounced like they think it was pronounced. So to begin with, at the top there, number 1 in the list, you've got alpha. Alpha is pronounced like a short A, like ah, like it says there as top. Now, the long version of alpha, in Greek, vowels are short or long, just like they are in English. The long version of alpha is like ah. It's long because it's held longer, not necessarily because it's a different sound, although you will see some controversy about that. But for our purposes, you got ah and ah. Then you got beta right there, or B, right? The B sound. Pretty simple. B, beta, B. The third one you have there is gamma. Gamma makes a G sound, never a soft G, never a J sound, always a G. Now, if you put that gamma in front of certain characters, though, then it nasalizes. It makes an n sound. So if you put it before a sound that sounds like k, it's going to sound like nk, like that. Then you got delta. Delta makes a d sound. Very simple, just like our D we have in the Roman alphabet. Then you have epsilon right there. Epsilon is a short E sound, eh. Zeta, or I should say zeta, it looks like a Z. You want it to be a Z. In modern Greek, it's pretty much a Z, but it's not in ancient Greek. It's not zeta, it's zeta. What is that difference? Well, it's sort of like an S and a D sound put together. Kind of like it says here, wisdom, like that. Zd, zd, zeta, like that. Now, you will see some people say it's actually the opposite. It's like a DS sound, like ads. But for our purposes, we're going with what Athanasde says, which is a zd sound. Right below zeta, see, I want to call it a Z too, even after all this time. I don't know why. Right below zeta, you have an eta. Zeta, eta, theta. Eta. And eta is a long E sound, but it kind of sounds more like a long A sound. A, like that. You got bed, bed. Like bed, eh. You got ed, like that. And it usually comes out kind of like A, like that. If that makes sense. Theta. Theta is the... Here they have it as an aspirated T sound. And what that means is kind of sounds like a T that you breathe through. Not T, but T, like that. In English, it's very hard for us to distinguish those sounds. So typically, we make it a voiceless dental frictive. And that sounds complicated. It's not. It's just th. Like think. Th. Like that. It's usually how we pronounce theta. That's how we're going to do it here. Iota, it's either going to be I or E. Like that, depending on whether it's short or long. Kind of like an I. Kappa, K. Just like that. Just like a K. Lambda, like an L. L. Mu, like an M. M. Nu, like an N. N. Xi makes a sound just like an X. K and an S put together, as you can see there. Omicron, little o, makes a sound like oh, kind of like that. You got boat or goat here. It's sort of similar to the omega we're going to see here in a minute, where it's like oh. Like that. Now, pi makes a P sound, just like a P. Hairs always messes people up. It messed me up in the beginning. It'll mess you up too. Rho. Rho looks like a P. You want it to be a P, just like you wanted zeta to be a Z. It's not. It's a not just an R sound, but it's a rolled R sound, or they have your trilled. It's hard to do. I hate rolling R's, but you got to. So that's what it is. You're going to want it to be a P so bad. It's not a P. It's a hr sound. And almost like an R, but you breathe through it. Hr. Sigma, which is right there, just like an S, but it is voiced. One thing, there's a distinction in sounds between voiced and voiceless, or unvoiced. A lot of letters are basically or basically represent the same sound. One though is voiced and one isn't. Take for example, you got like a D sound and a T sound. A T sound is unvoiced. And if you don't believe me, put your finger on your vocal cords and make a T sound. Your vocal cords do not vibrate. But do the same thing when you're making a duh sound. Duh, duh, duh. You'll feel it vibrate. D is voiced, T isn't. In English, we sometimes voice our S. Sometimes S is unvoiced, and sometimes it's voiced. It comes out like a Z. Sigma in ancient Greek is sometimes voiced and sometimes voiceless. It's voiceless when it's just kind of by itself, but before certain letters, before a beta, before a gamma, before a delta, before a mu, then it is voiced. Then it is a Z sound. Tau, which is like T. Upsilon, U or U, like that. Kind of like short U, long U. You want it to be a Y, it's not a Y. Phi, kind of like what we saw before with theta. There's a P sound in ancient Greek and there's a P sound in ancient Greek. It's really hard for people who speak English to differentiate those. So we usually just call phi f, like that, like an F. Basically make like an F sound, phi. Chi. Now this is the only one where you got to kind of insist on the difference because there's absolutely nothing in ancient Greek that sounds like ch. So you've got a kappa, k, and then you've got a chi, which is a ch, like that. You want to really work on chi because, of course, if you're learning Biblical Greek, it is the first character in the title Christos, Jesus Christos, Jesus Christ. Right below that, you've got psi, and yeah, you say that P, psi. You're going to read the Psalms, psi, like that. And then, last but not least, you got God, who's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Well, you got the Omega right there at the end. Omega, big O. Here it has it as aw, like that. And sometimes you'll see that, but more often it's just your standard O, but held longer. Omicron, O. Omega, O, like that. So, that is the Greek alphabet.
Right. So I didn't really have a lot of special effects or anything really fancy. I'm not that awesome at editing films. But I hope you found this interesting and informative. And if you did, I'll make some more videos, maybe getting a little more in-depth into how to read these things. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I hope I cleared up any confusion you might have and make it easier for you to understand the biblical languages that much more. This is Jared Muma, signing off. Thank you very much for watching.